The room fell silent the moment young Quaim sat across the polished mahogany poker table, his small hands trembling not from fear, but from the cold arrogance radiating from billionaire Chief Darlington NBA. Moments earlier, the wealthy mogul had laughed loudly, mocking the boy's mother, insisting that her son should entertain the guests with a harmless round of poker. Everyone assumed that would be a quick humiliation, a casual display of power, another reminder that the rich could turn anyone's child into a spectacle. Quaim's mother, Amma, stood frozen beside the doorway, her breath trapped in her chest as she watched her son step into a game meant to break him. But when the cards were dealt, something unexpected shifted in the air. Quaim's gaze sharpened. His posture straightened, and the nervous child seemed to vanish. Within minutes, whispers spread around the room. Each move he made grew bolder, sharper, and frighteningly precise. The billionaire's smirk slowly dissolved as he realized the boy was not guessing, he was calculating. By the time Quaim placed his final card on the table, Chief Darlington wasn't laughing anymore. He wasn't even breathing. Because the boy had just exposed something impossible, a level of genius no one in that room was prepared for. In the heart of Lagos, where the skyline shimmered with the gleam of ambition and the hum of life never paused, the Adebayo penthouse towered like a monument to wealth. From the 35th floor, one could see the city stretch endlessly, a tapestry of honking traffic, bustling markets, and neon signs that promised luxury and indulgence. Inside, the atmosphere was entirely different, air-conditioned, perfumed, and curated with taste that spoke of centuries of generational privilege. The penthouse belonged to Chinedu Adebayo, a billionaire with a reputation for sharp wit, sharper investments, and an ego so vast it often eclipsed common sense. His evenings were usually reserved for power dinners and poker games where Lagos elite measured influence as easily as their chips. Tonight, however, he had something different in mind, a casual entertainment show of his own superiority. Guests filled the room, socialites, CEOs, and a few journalists whose pens were poised to capture every sharp remark from the man who had made billions off tech and real estate deals. Laughter echoed across the marble floors, glasses clinked, and the faint sound of live jazz spilled from the grand piano in the corner. Yet behind the laughter there was a certain edgy confidence that bordered on arrogance, one that whispered to everyone in the room the Chinedu Adebayo was untouchable. Among the staff quietly moving through the crowd was Amahol Nwasu, her hands steady as she balanced trays of hors d'oeuvres. She had worked for the Adebayo family for 8 years, tending not only to the household but also to Chinedu's children, keeping track of schedules and managing the seamless flow of domestic life. Amahol knew the city's elite well enough to anticipate their moods, and she knew her place, a silent, invisible presence in a world that measured worth by wealth and pedigree. But tonight her son, Nwasu, would step into that same room unseen and underestimated, to witness what she knew all along. Genius cannot be measured by privilege. Tay was 11, but his mind worked in layers that often confused even adults. While other children his age played football in the dusty streets or argued over video games, Tay immersed himself in books about strategy, probability, and psychology. His evenings were spent in the quiet corners of Lagos public libraries, poring over chess manuals, mathematical puzzles, and online poker tutorials. The boy had a way of seeing patterns where others saw chaos, of predicting behavior where others relied on luck. Yet he had learned to keep this knowledge hidden because in his world, visibility could invite ridicule or worse, dismissal. Chinedu, oblivious to any potential challenge, noticed Tay as he moved through the room with his mother. The boy was small, almost fragile-looking, and clearly out of place among the manicured children of Lagos' richest families. A smirk spread across Chinedu's face. "Amahol, bring the boy here. Let's have some fun," he said, his voice dripping with amusement. There was a cruel sort of curiosity in it, a test of class, a playful reminder of who held power. For Chinedu, poker was a game of skill, yes, but also a stage on which superiority could be performed. He had no idea that tonight the stage would belong to someone else. Tay stepped forward, his hands clasped nervously but his eyes steady. He had anticipated this moment in the library countless times. practicing silently in his mind the way he might handle a real game against someone like Chinedu. This was no longer theory. This was life imitating the simulations he had run in his head 1,000 times. Chinedu's friends chuckled at the sight of the small boy, whispering bets about how long it would take before he folded, begged, or made a mistake. Their laughter was unkind but expected. The room operated under assumptions, and assumptions were Tay's playground. The boy's presence had barely registered with the rest of the crowd when Chinedu handed him a stack of chips. "Let's see if you've got any brains, child," he said, voice loud enough to command attention, a signal that this was meant to be a spectacle. Around the table, the poker chips clicked against the felt, a metallic punctuation in the tense silence that had settled as Tay took his seat. Patrons leaned in, curious, amused, and ready to witness what they assumed would be a trivial display of childhood panic. But Tay's mind was already calculating pot odds, reading micro-expressions, predicting behavioral tells-all without a twitch of nervousness that would betray him. Amahal, watching from the sidelines, felt a surge of pride. She had raised Tay to see patterns where others saw chance, to find logic in chaos, and to never underestimate the value of observation. In this room filled with wealth, entitlement, and centuries of assumed superiority, her son would quietly overturn every expectation. And though she feared the ridicule that might come if he stumbled, she trusted in the boy's extraordinary capacity. Chinedu, meanwhile, shuffled the deck with a confidence that only decades of dominance could produce. "Gentlemen," he announced, his voice carrying across the polished penthouse, "let's show this boy how the world works." His smirk widened as he dealt the first cards. The tension in the room shifted subtly, the air seemed to tighten, charged with anticipation. Though no one yet knew that the lesson about to unfold would be far beyond a simple game of cards. From the first glance at his hand, Tay knew he had possibilities. He could sense patterns in the way Chinedu's fingers twitched, the subtle twitch of his jaw when he looked at the community cards. This was no longer about fun. It was about intellect, observation, and the quiet assertion of ability that had been underestimated for too long. Tay's calm contrasted sharply with the laughter and sneers around him. Every move would be deliberate, every decision informed by lessons learned in libraries and late-night strategy sessions, far from the glamour of Lagos penthouses. And so, the game began not with fanfare but with quiet precision. Cards were dealt, chips were pushed. The room expected amusement. It would witness brilliance. The first round began quietly, deceptively casual, as Chinedu Adebayo dealt the cards with a flourish that demanded attention. The assembled guests leaned in, glasses raised halfway, phones poised for a viral moment. The expectation was clear: the boy would fold after a few timid plays, embarrassed and exposed. Atenwasu, sitting straighter than his 11 years suggested, let his eyes scan the table, his mind already recording patterns. Chinedu's fingers hovered over his chips. A subtle signal that would go unnoticed by most. But not by Tay. He had been watching people all his life, friends at school, strangers on buses, even the occasional wealthy guest his mother served during parties. Micro-expressions were like Morse code to him. A twitch of the finger, a blink, a breath held too long, all were clues, pieces of a puzzle he had been assembling for years. Tonight, the puzzle included one of Lagos' most arrogant billionaires, and the stakes were more than money. There were assumptions, pride, and ego. Chinedu opened the round with a modest bet, his smirk daring the boy to fold. "You first," he said, a cruel amusement lacing his words. "Show us what you're made of, son." The other guests chuckled softly, some whispering bets among themselves, others raising eyebrows in curiosity. Tay's heart didn't race. Instead, he calculated. He saw that the flop might offer him a straight draw, that the turn could change the dynamics entirely if he managed to manipulate the pot correctly. He called. It was a small gesture, one that betrayed nothing but bought him information. The room tensed as Chinedu's hand hovered over the deck for the flop. 3 cards slid onto the table with a soft thud: 5 of hearts, 9 of clubs, 6 of spades. Tay's eyes flickered slightly, just enough to note the change in Chinedu's posture. His fingers flexed near his chips, his slightly. The billionaire's first tell, The boy smiled faintly, not at the cards but at the psychology unfolding before him. This wasn't just poker. This was human behavior distilled into actions, habits, and unconscious movements. He raised a small, calculated increase, enough to see Xanedu's reaction but not enough to trigger immediate outrage. The room gasped softly. An 11-year-old raising a billionaire. It was almost comic, almost absurd. Xanedu's jaw tightened. He leaned forward, trying to impose presence, to remind everyone who owned the room. "Interesting move," he said, voice calm but edged with tension. His ego bristled. He had never faced resistance this early. Normally people folded under the subtle pressure he exerted without raising a finger. But Tay was different. The boy's eyes were steady, unafraid, analytical. He wasn't intimidated. That alone was enough to unsettle Xanedu. The turn card arrived. 9 of hearts. Tay's hand improved subtly, but more importantly, the dynamic shifted. He knew Xanedu would see the 9 and consider possibilities, a pair, 2 pair, perhaps even a hidden straight. The billionaire's confidence remained visible, but now cracks were forming. A slight hesitation, a blink too long, a hand twitch. Tay catalogued it all in milliseconds. He checked. Not because he was weak, but because he wanted Xanedu to act. The boy was setting a trap, slow playing with precision. Xanedu, sensing potential weakness, raised. His ego demanded aggression, demanded control, demanded to erase the audacity of a child who dared sit across from him. The room leaned in collectively, sensing the drama, sensing the tension that now pulsed stronger than the jazz in the background. Tay called again. The subtlety of the call was lost on the guests, but Xanedu's smirk faltered. The boy was teaching him a lesson. Underestimation is dangerous. Even a small, quiet presence can hold enormous power if approached with observation and patience. Xanedu's mind raced. How could this be? This was a child. He should be flustered, nervous, untrained. Yet every move the boy made demonstrated a mastery that rivaled and perhaps exceeded his own. The final card, the river, fell with a soft slap against the felt 7 of spades. Tay's hand completed a straight 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. The culmination of strategy, observation, and calm. Meanwhile, Xanedu's face was a mask of disbelief, a mixture of anger and confusion he could not hide. He had been trained to read adults, not children. He had been prepared for cunning rivals, not a young boy whose mind was a weapon of pattern recognition and psychological calculation. Xanedu blinked rapidly, his fingers brushing toward his watch, a habitual tell he didn't even realize he had. The room noticed, the tension heightened. Patricia Utica, a socialite known for her sharp tongue, whispered to a friend, "This can't be real. He's actually reading Xanedu." Laughter from earlier evaporated into a hush. Phones raised to record for amusement now captured history. Xanedu pushed all his chips into the center of the table, a desperate all-in. "Let's see what you're really made of, boy," he demanded, eyes wild, lips tight. Every person in the room felt the audacity, the hubris, the inevitability that something monumental was about to happen. The air vibrated with anticipation. Tay paused, calm, scanning the chips, the expressions, the micro-movements before making the simple call. Silence fell. The chips in the center formed a small mountain, the tangible representation of fear, arrogance, and miscalculation. The hand had been played perfectly. Xanedu had committed every dollar, blinded by assumptions, by the prejudice that children, especially children from working class homes, could never outthink a billionaire. Vinio Coro, a professional poker consultant invited as a guest, could barely contain his astonishment. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, voice carrying authority honed by years and high-stakes games, "you are witnessing something extraordinary." He gestured toward the cards laid across the felt. 6, 9, 5, 4, 5. If Tay's reading is correct, he's been holding the winning strategy since the turn. The room collectively held its breath as Tay flipped his cards: 5 of clubs, 6 of diamonds, 7 of spades, 8 of hearts, 9 of spades. A straight, complete and undeniable. Gasps and murmurs rippled across the penthouse. Patricia dropped her wineglass, it shattered on the marble floor. Chinidu's mouth opened and closed, silent disbelief replacing arrogance. Vinny continued, breaking down the play for the room. Notice the precision. Call, raise, slow play, call again. Every move was calculated not for intimidation but for maximum psychological leverage. This is advanced strategy concepts taught at professional levels, often at great cost. And this child executed flawlessly, reading the opponent, controlling pot size, exploiting assumptions. Chinidu's hands trembled as he realized the enormity of what had just occurred. The boy he had dismissed as invisible as background noise had dismantled his pride, exposed the fragility of assumptions, and dominated a room that had never before seen him as a force to be reckoned with. Tay, 11 years old, had taken the invisible power of knowledge and observation and made it tangible. Amahul stepped forward, voice steady, pride shining through her composed exterior. My son has been studying strategy, psychology, and probability. While the world assumed he was a child who could be mocked, he was preparing himself to stand against anyone who underestimated him. The room's energy shifted from amusement to awe, from casual observation to genuine respect. Even Chinidu's friends, who had come expecting comedy, were speechless. James Morrison, a Lagos media personality, whispered, "I don't believe it. He's actually teaching Chinidu." Every guest, wealthy and influential, felt a shift. The rules of the room, the expectations, the hierarchy had been rewritten by intellect, focus, and skill. Tay, calm and composed, collected the chips from the pot. He didn't gloat. He didn't smile. There was a quiet dignity in his actions, a message that brilliance does not need to announce itself. The room, however, could not look away. Phones recorded, whispers spread, and the story of the boy who defeated the billionaire in his own arena began to take on the weight of legend. Chinidu slumped back in his chair, chest heaving, ego shattered. He realized the truth too late. Assumptions had cost him more than money. They had cost him reputation, pride, and the comfort of believing the world could be measured by wealth alone. Vinny's voice finally broke the silence. "Play the player, not the stereotype," he said. And tonight that lesson has been delivered in the most unforgettable way. The penthouse buzzed with energy that no one expected. It was no longer a poker game. It was a reckoning, a lesson in observation, intelligence, and humility. And at the center of it all, Tainwozu sat quietly, 11 years old, a master of psychology and strategy, proving what his mother always knew. Brilliance cannot be predicted by circumstance, and genius cannot be underestimated. The second round began with a tension that made the air feel almost tangible. Chinidu Adebayo, still reeling from the humiliation of the first hand, tried to reassert his dominance. His fingers drummed nervously on the felt, betraying his outward composure. The other guests watched, eager for either another spectacle or a chance to witness the boy fold under pressure. But Tainwozu's eyes, dark and focused, scanned the table with quiet authority. He wasn't nervous. He was preparing. "Are we ready?" Chinidu asked, attempting a confident smile. It faltered as Vinny Okoro, the professional poker consultant, fixed him with a steady gaze. "I think we're all ready to see if the first hand was a fluke," Vinny said. The billionaire's ego flared at the implied doubt, but he brushed it off, determined to reclaim control. The cards were dealt. Tay didn't glance at them immediately. Instead, he studied Chinidu, noting the subtle twitch of his left eyebrow, the slight tension in his jaw. Every micro-expression told a story: fear, frustration, desperation. The boy's mind catalogued each detail like a masterful chess player setting traps on a board. Chinidu opened aggressively, raising 3 times the big blind. The move was designed to intimidate, to force the boy into folding quickly. The guests leaned forward, murmuring among themselves. Tay considered his options. Folding would be easy, safe, but it wouldn't teach the billionaire the lesson he deserved. Calling outright could be dangerous. He needed precision, patience, and timing. He called, his voice calm and neutral. The room reacted audibly, gasps, whispers, and the click of recording devices. The flop landed. Queen of Hearts, 10 of Diamonds, Jack of Spades. Tay's eyes lit up. A powerful draw, but more importantly, an opportunity to manipulate both the pot and Chinedu's perception. Chinedu's eyes narrowed. He recognized the potential threat but couldn't quite read the boy's confidence. He raised again, larger this time, forcing Tay to consider the size of the pot versus his hand potential. The guests sensed the escalating stakes. Phones were recording not just for entertainment now, but for posterity. Something extraordinary was unfolding. Tye studied Chinedu's hand movement as he reached for the chips. The subtle hesitation, almost imperceptible, indicated indecision. A micro-tell that a seasoned adult might overlook, but Tay exploited with precision. He raised further, small enough to avoid scaring Chinedu but large enough to test his reaction. The room reacted. Patricia Utica whispered to a friend, "I don't believe this. The boy, he's controlling him." Laughter had disappeared. Now anticipation has replaced it. This was no longer a spectacle of amusement. This was a demonstration of pure strategic brilliance. Chinedu's lips tightened. The smirk that had defined his arrogance earlier was gone. His ego demanded action. He called, committing more money to the pot, unaware that he was walking into a carefully constructed trap. Tay's straight draw remained invisible, his confidence quiet yet radiating power. The turn card arrived, 9 of spades. Tay's hand now completed a potential straight, but he didn't reveal any excitement. Instead, he observed Chinedu's reactions, cataloging every micro-expression. The billionaire's breathing had quickened subtly. His pupils dilated slightly, a tell that would have escaped almost anyone else. Not Tay, he was already 2 steps ahead, he checked. The move was deliberate, designed to provoke Chinedu into action. The billionaire, sensing potential weakness, moved aggressively again. "I don't like hesitation," he barked, shoving a large portion of chips forward. His hand shook ever so slightly, a crack in the armor. Tay's mind noted it, storing the pattern for later reference. The room leaned in collectively, sensing the battle. The energy was palpable, almost electric. This wasn't just poker. It was psychological warfare at its finest. Chinedu believed he was forcing the boy's hand, but Tay controlled the flow, dictating the pace, shaping perception and manipulating confidence. Every action, every hesitation, every subtle movement of the billionaire was data for the boy's masterful calculations. Tay raised again. Subtly, almost nonchalantly. The act wasn't to intimidate but to encourage Chinedu to overcome it, to reveal more of himself through behavior rather than words. The guests murmured. Phones hovered, capturing the incredible scene of an 11-year-old boy manipulating one of Lagos' wealthiest men as if he were a mere pawn. Chinedu blinked rapidly. He was aware of the trap, but it was too late. His pride had him entangled, too invested to fold now. The psychological weight of the evening bore down on him. Each chip he pushed forward was not just money, it was reputation, ego, and a desperate attempt to reassert superiority. The room watched, captivated by the human drama unfolding. The river card arrived. 8 of hearts. Tay's straight was complete, hidden perfectly beneath the facade of cautious play. The tension was suffocating. Chinedu's face betrayed panic, but he masked it with aggression, shoving all remaining chips forward. The room gasped audibly. The boy's composure did not waver. He assessed the total pot, the board, the subtle tells that had accumulated throughout the hand. He called calmly, deliberately. The silence in the room was absolute. Phones poised, jaws dropped, eyes wide. Everyone knew something historic had just occurred. Tay reached for his cards, revealed the 7 and 9 of spades, completing a straight. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. The room erupted into stunned gasps. Patricia Utica's wineglass shattered, her earlier amusement replaced by awe. Chinedu's face was ashen. Every chip he had risked, every ounce of pride he had invested, had been undone by an 11-year-old. The billionaire stammered, trying to rationalize, to cling to his shattered worldview. It's impossible, he muttered. Tay, calm and dignified, looked at him and said, "It's not impossible. You just assumed I couldn't do it. Vinny Okoro, a professional authority cracking with genuine admiration, explained to the stunned audience. Notice the precision. The call, the raise, the slow play. Every move calculated not for show but to extract maximum value while controlling perception. This is not beginner's luck. This is mastery of both poker and psychology. The room's energy shifted entirely. What had begun as cruel amusement became a lesson in intelligence, patience, and the danger of assumptions. Every guest, regardless of wealth or social status, was forced to reconsider their biases. Tay's calm command, his observation skills, and his capacity for strategic thought turned a poker game into a public reckoning. Chenidu slumped in his chair, defeated, humiliated, but also enlightened to an uncomfortable truth. Arrogance and assumptions could be dismantled by intellect, even from the most unlikely source. Tay collected the pot silently, dignity intact. The act of winning had never been about money. It had always been about teaching a lesson in observation, restraint, and human psychology. Angela Norsu, standing in the corner with pride barely contained, finally spoke. My son has been preparing for this moment for years, watching, learning, practicing. While everyone assumed he was too young or unworthy, he was mastering skills that could rival the best in the world. The room nodded. Slowly shifting from disbelief to respect, the billionaire's friends, previously smug and mocking, were silent, eyes wide. James Morrison, a media personality known for irreverent commentary, whispered, I've never seen anything like this. Phones recorded history, capturing the teaching moment, the public dismantling of pride, and the brilliance of a boy who refused to be underestimated. Vinny stepped forward, voice carrying authority. Play the player, not the stereotype, he said. Tonight, that lesson was delivered flawlessly. Observe not just the hand, but the patience, the perception, and the mastery of psychology. Every move calculated, every reaction anticipated. This is how you win, not by luck, but by understanding people. Chenidu's face remained pale, his mind unable to process the scope of what had happened. Tay, 11 years old, had not only beaten him at poker but also at pride, assumptions, and ego. The room's focus shifted from money to lesson, from amusement to awe. Tay had transformed perception, dismantled prejudice, and proven the power of intellect and observation in the most public, undeniable way. The applause grew. Tay stood, collecting the chips with calm dignity. The guests, once laughing at his youth, now offered respect, albeit tinged with disbelief. Chenidu slumped back in his chair, defeated, enlightened, and quietly enraged by the undeniable genius of a boy he had underestimated simply because of circumstance. The aftermath of the hand was immediate and electric. The room, once filled with the clinking of glasses and polite laughter, now resonated with a tense silence. Every eye was on Chenidu Adebayo, the billionaire who had just suffered a public humiliation at the hands of an 11-year-old boy. His face remained pale, his jaw tight with a mixture of shock, disbelief, and anger. For the first time, the facade of wealth and power seemed brittle, vulnerable, human. Tengwosu sat calmly in his oversized chair, legs dangling slightly above the floor, observing the room with a maturity that belied his age. He didn't celebrate, he didn't boast. He simply allowed the moment to settle, letting the lesson speak for itself. The boy had learned long ago that real power was quiet, subtle, and unassuming, like a river carving canyons over centuries. Patricia Utika's laughter had vanished entirely. She set down her wine glass carefully, as if afraid to disturb the weight of the room. Angela, your son? She began, her voice faltering. She trailed off, unsure how to articulate the awe and disbelief she felt. Angela was, whose eyes were bright with pride, but her expression was calm. She had raised her son to observe first, act second, and always trust his preparation. Tonight, that preparation had paid off in spectacular fashion. Vinny Okoro, the seasoned poker professional, rose from his chair and addressed the room. His voice carried both authority and the reading of every tell. Tay didn't just win a hand. He exposed assumptions, dismantled ego, and redefined the very meaning of intelligence at this table. A ripple of murmurs spread through the guests. Some shook their heads, unwilling to accept the reality in front of them. Others nodded slowly, their expressions shifting from skepticism to admiration. Phones were no longer capturing entertainment. They were documenting a historical lesson in intellect, psychology, and the power of underestimation. Chenidu's hands rested limply on the felt. He had been defeated not by cards alone but by perception, observation, and patience. His own confidence, so carefully cultivated over decades, had been dismantled by the unlikeliest of opponents. The humiliation was public, undeniable, and profound. You were watching me? He stammered, voice breaking. For years? Tay nodded, expression calm. Every hand, every gesture, every pattern. You taught me what to look for without ever knowing it. Chenidu's mind reeled. The arrogance that had allowed him to underestimate a child had blinded him to the reality of skill, strategy, and human psychology. Patricia Udoka shifted uncomfortably in her chair. She had come expecting entertainment, a spectacle of power and wealth, perhaps a few laughs at the boy's expense. Instead, she had witnessed a lesson in humility and intelligence that left her questioning not only her assumptions about age, but also about privilege and opportunity. Angela spoke, her voice steady but filled with quiet pride. My son didn't just learn poker. He learned to observe, to anticipate, to remain calm under pressure. While you assumed he was limited by age or circumstance, he was learning more than any of you gave him credit for. Her words landed like stones in the room. Echoing with undeniable truth, Tay's eyes scanned the room, taking note of reactions just as he had done with Chenidu. Some faces were flushed with embarrassment. Others, like James Morrison's, were wide with astonishment. Even the seasoned professionals present found themselves reflecting on the boy's uncanny ability to merge mathematics, psychology, and timing into a cohesive strategy. It wasn't just talent. It was preparation, observation, and relentless focus. Chenidu tried to regain composure, but the moment had passed. Every move he had made in arrogance had been anticipated, every tell exploited. He was forced to confront a hard truth. His assumptions about Tay, assumptions based on age, race, and socioeconomic status, had cost him not only money but dignity. Tay stood slowly, reaching for the chips with deliberate calm. Each movement was measured, purposeful, a demonstration that true mastery required poise, not aggression. The room seemed to hold its collective breath as he stacked the winnings, not as a show of triumph, but as evidence of quiet, undeniable superiority. Vinny Okoro stepped forward again. Observe closely, he said. Tay didn't just play cards. He played people. Every raise, every call, every hesitation was a calculation. He understood pot odds, psychology, and human behavior in a way that surpasses most adults at this table. This is not a child's play. This is genius in action. Some guests whispered among themselves. I've never seen anything like it, murmured one. How does a child know this much? The answer, though simple, was invisible to most. Tay had been meticulous. He had studied, observed, and practiced relentlessly. He had developed a discipline that turned disadvantage into strength, invisibility into power. Chenidu's mind raced. He could not accept it. It's impossible, he muttered. Tay's voice, calm and precise, cut through the doubt. It's not impossible. You just assumed I couldn't do it. And your assumptions cost you everything. The billionaire's friends shifted uncomfortably, realizing that the game had exposed not just Chenidu's failure, but their own prejudices and assumptions. The room was transformed. What began as entertainment had become a moral reckoning, a lesson in the perils of underestimation, bias, and pride. Angela's presence was quiet but commanding. She had always known her son's capabilities, but watching him demonstrate them in such a public, undeniable way left her heart swelling with pride. He didn't just beat him at poker, she whispered to a friend. He dismantled assumptions, exposed prejudice, and showed everyone what real preparation and intelligence look like. The tension in the room began to shift, replaced by admiration, reflection, and a sense of collective humility. Even Chenidu, though still stung by public defeat, could not deny the skill, strategy, and foresight that had led to his downfall. Tae's victory was more than a hand. It was a revelation, a statement of intellect unbounded by circumstance. Patricia Udoka, once so confident in her social superiority, found herself speechless. She had anticipated amusement, a simple story to recount later, but instead, she had witnessed a child transform perception, dismantle arrogance, and command respect in a room designed for the elite. Vinny Okoro's voice rose above the whispers. Tonight, you all witness something rare, the intersection of intellect, patience, and observation. Tae controlled the narrative, manipulated perception, and executed strategy flawlessly. This is not luck. This is genius. And it serves as a reminder that assumptions about age, background, or circumstance are dangerous. Chinedu's composure finally crumbled. His arrogance, the foundation of his wealth and social dominance, had been publicly dismantled. He realized painfully that Tae's brilliance wasn't an anomaly, it was the product of preparation, focus, and understanding human behavior in a way he had never considered. The crowd's reaction shifted again. From shock to admiration, applause building slowly but steadily. Phones captured every moment, not just for entertainment, but as testimony to the boy's extraordinary talent. Tae's silence, his calm, his poise became a lesson in leadership, strategy, and the quiet power of observation. Angela stepped closer to her son, placing a hand on his shoulder. "This is just the beginning," she whispered. Tae nodded, understanding that tonight's victory was more than money. It was a lesson, a statement, and the first step in a path that would challenge assumptions and redefine expectations for everyone who had doubted him. The evening ended not with laughter but with reflection. Guests left the penthouse, conversations now focused on humility, observation, and the subtle but undeniable power of preparation and intellect. Chinedu, once a symbol of arrogance and wealth, departed in quiet disgrace, forced to confront the consequences of his assumptions. For Tae, the night was a triumph of skill over circumstance, intellect over prejudice, preparation over privilege. He had won more than a game. He had won respect, reshaped perceptions, and illuminated a path for others who might be overlooked or underestimated. The night had already begun its quiet transformation when the final hand was revealed. Tae Nwasu sat with an air of composed certainty, his small hands folded neatly on the felt. Yet every movement carried the weight of quiet authority. Chinedu Adebayo, once the image of power and untouchable dominance, now sat slumped in disbelief. His eyes darted from the boy to the table, to the scattered chips, to the expressions of the other guests, each more uncomfortably candid than the last. For a moment, the penthouse seemed suspended in time. The room, which had been filled with superficial chatter and polished arrogance, was now a theater of introspection. Each individual confronted a personal truth. Intelligence, skill, and preparation were not measured by wealth, social standing, or even age. Tonight, the hierarchy of the elite had been quietly, irrevocably disrupted. Vinny Okoro, the veteran of countless poker tables, rose slowly, his seasoned presence commanding attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, voice resonant with awe and authority, "what you've just witnessed is more than a card game. This is strategy, psychology, and patience in its purest form." Tae read every story, anticipated every move, and controlled the narrative of this table with the precision of a master. The room murmured in acknowledgement, though a few still resisted, clinging to disbelief. But disbelief had its limits. As Vinny continued, even the most skeptical began to see the pattern, the calculation, the undeniable skill that had led to Chinedu's downfall. Tae finally spoke. His voice calm yet piercing. "It's simple. People reveal more than they realize. Every gesture, every hesitation, every glance tells a story. You just have to watch. And when you do, you can turn assumptions into mistakes for those who made them." The statement, while simple, carried a profound weight. Every guest felt it, even Chinedu, whose face had lost the color of confidence, replaced by a pale shade of reckoning. For decades he had wielded armor, assuming intelligence and competence could be measured by social standing and inherited advantage. That illusion had just been shattered by a boy who had spent years observing, learning and mastering what truly mattered. Angela Noozu moved closer to her son, her pride barely contained. Tay has always been observant, she said quietly to Patricia Udoka, who now looked uneasy. He watches, he analyzes, he prepares. He doesn't just react, he anticipates. And tonight, he showed that brilliance can come from anywhere, even from the shadows that some of you never thought to look into. Patricia's laughter had long since vanished. She could feel the magnitude of the lesson. The sheer audacity of a young boy transforming a room full of adults into witnesses of a reality they had ignored. That true intelligence cannot be constrained by age, race, or circumstance. Vinny raised his hand for emphasis. Observe the betting sequence, he instructed, pointing at the chips and community cards. Tay's play was textbook slow playing combined with advanced pot control. He allowed his opponent to overcommit, creating maximum leverage without ever revealing the strength he held. This isn't a beginner strategy. This is the kind of mastery that takes decades to understand. Yet he executed it flawlessly at 11 years old. James Morrison, who had been skeptical since the start, leaned forward, his disbelief replaced by intrigue. Are you saying he's really that good? He asked. Vinny's nod was solemn. He's exceptional. Not because of the cards he held, but because of how he understood the people at this table. Skill is knowing what to see, what to anticipate, and how to act without revealing your hand prematurely. That's genius. Chinidu, unable to contain the tension any longer, spoke with a trembling voice. This can't be real. He's a child. Tay's response was calm, precise, and pointed. I'm not a child in what I've learned. Age doesn't determine knowledge, and wealth doesn't determine intelligence. You assumed I would be weaker because of how I looked, and that assumption cost you everything. A hush fell over the room. The statement was not merely a declaration of victory. It was a moral reckoning. Every guest, whether billionaire, socialite, or seasoned professional, was forced to confront their own assumptions, biases, and blind spots. The boy had revealed that the true measure of intelligence lay not in inherited advantage but in observation, preparation, and analytical thinking. Angela watched her son closely, proud but reflective. She knew this was only the beginning. Tay has always had access to knowledge, even when circumstances seemed against him, she said softly. He learned from books, from observation, from free resources. What he demonstrated tonight wasn't talent alone, it was preparation, determination, and relentless curiosity. The social and psychological impact of the hand continued to unfold. The guests, once so comfortable in their superiority, now faced an uncomfortable mirror. Their laughter had been replaced by reflection. Their amusement at underestimation had turned into recognition of brilliance. Even the smallest gestures, the tilt of a head, a raised eyebrow, a subtle smile carried meaning now, revealing who had been observant and who had been blinded by privilege. Chinidu attempted to regain control, attempting a forced smile. Well, this was a lesson. I suppose, he muttered, but the words lacked conviction. He could feel the room's collective judgment. A silent but undeniable verdict. Arrogance, when combined with prejudice, is always vulnerable to those underestimated. Patricia Udoka, still adjusting to the sudden moral gravity, whispered to a friend, I never thought he's extraordinary. The friend nodded, equally stunned. The evening had transformed from entertainment to revelation. This wasn't just about poker. It was about perception, bias, and the value of recognizing potential where others refused to see it. Vinny stepped closer to Tay, placing a hand briefly on the boy's shoulder, a gesture of mentorship and respect. What you just demonstrated tonight, he said, voice resonant, will be studied by professionals, not because you're young but because you're exceptional. The lessons of patience, observation, and strategic control are timeless. You've proven that brilliance can't be hidden, it can only be underestimated temporarily. The room collectively exhaled, as though the tension had been held in every breath. Chinedu's defeat was no longer merely a game. It was a symbol of the dangers of underestimation and the arrogance of assumed superiority. Every observer understood that the night would be remembered not just for its drama, but for the moral lesson embedded within every bet. Every raise, every fold. Angela's voice broke the reflective silence. Tay's brilliance isn't limited to poker, she said, her pride radiating. He applies observation, logic, and patience to everything. Tonight, the lesson was visible to everyone, but his potential extends far beyond this room. The question is whether people are willing to see it. Tay's quiet confidence contrasted sharply with the discomfort of those around him. He knew that the true measure of his victory was not the money on the table, but the unmasking of assumptions and the demonstration that intellect and preparation can triumph over arrogance and prejudice. As the guests filed out of the penthouse, conversations shifted from gossip to reflection. The evening had begun as entertainment but had evolved into an education on humility, perception, and respect for intellect in all its forms. Phones buzzed with texts, social media notifications, and messages of astonishment. The event would not be forgotten. It was a turning point. Trenidu, defeated and humiliated, left last, his mind a whirlwind of disbelief. The billionaire who had once commanded respect through wealth and dominance now understood the painful reality that assumptions based on appearance, age, or background could be his undoing. His social empire had been shaken and his credibility eroded by an 11-year-old boy whose preparation, observation, and analytical thinking outstripped the years and privileges he had assumed gave him an insurmountable advantage. For Tay, the night was a quiet triumph. He had not only won a game, he had shifted perspectives, challenged biases, and demonstrated that preparation, patience, and intellect are forces greater than wealth, privilege, or assumptions. He had transformed a space designed for superficial judgment into a theater of revelation. Angela placed her hand on Tay's shoulder once more, whispering softly, "This is only the beginning, my son. Tonight you've taught them to see. Tomorrow you'll teach the world." As the last of the guests departed, Tay's calm eyes followed them. He understood the ripple effects of the evening, the lessons in observation, humility, and respect for skill would spread far beyond the penthouse walls. The victory was more than monetary. It was cultural, moral, and intellectual. In the weeks that followed, videos of the game went viral, showcasing Tay's mastery to the world. Discussions erupted in social media, news outlets, and educational circles. Scholars and psychologists analyzed his strategy, noting the depth of observation, psychological understanding, and disciplined patience that had defined every move. The story inspired children across the continent, encouraging them to see intelligence not as a product of circumstance, but as a tool cultivated through curiosity, study, and practice. The transformation was not limited to Tay's personal story. Angela's advocacy for underprivileged children gained traction, leading to the creation of scholarship programs, mentorship initiatives, and educational outreach that prioritize potential over privilege. Communities began to recognize the brilliance in overlooked spaces, seeking to cultivate talent in every corner where curiosity and determination flourished. Chinedu Adebayo's empire had been diminished, his reputation tarnished, and his assumptions exposed for all to see. Yet in this downfall lay a lesson that true intelligence, preparation, and observation can upend hierarchies, challenge prejudice, and transform perceptions permanently. The evening in that Lagos penthouse would be remembered not merely as a poker game, but as a defining moment, a demonstration of the power of intellect over arrogance, observation over assumption, and preparation over entitlement. Tay Nwazu had not just played cards. He had redefined respect, shattered stereotypes, and ignited a cultural reckoning that would resonate for years to come. The city of Lagos woke the next morning to a story that would ripple far beyond the penthouse skyline. Tay Nwazu sat at the small wooden table in their modest apartment, reviewing probability charts and poker strategy notes he had kept tucked away for months. His mother, Angela, moved quietly in the kitchen, preparing breakfast while occasionally glancing at her son with uncontainable pride. The world had just witnessed a moment that was about intelligence, potential, and the audacity of youth. News outlets buzzed with clips of the penthouse showdown, each frame highlighting the tension, the calm precision of Tay, and the stunned disbelief of Fenidu Adebayo. Social media erupted with praise, debate, and admiration. Analysts dissected every move, every betting pattern, and every psychological play, marveling at the depth of understanding an 11-year-old had demonstrated. The story was no longer about a game of cards. It was about intellect, preparation, and the quiet power of observation. Tay's victory had immediate effects within his own community. Local schools and community centers reported a surge in interest in strategy games, chess, and educational programs that encouraged critical thinking. Children who had been overlooked, assumed incapable or invisible, now saw someone who looked like them, proving that brilliance could flourish anywhere. The Tay effect, as it quickly became known, inspired mentorship initiatives, scholarship programs, and a renewed focus on nurturing talent regardless of background or circumstance. Angela Nwasu, once constrained by the limitations of her job as a housekeeper, found doors opening that had been closed for years. Invitations to educational boards, philanthropic foundations, and advisory councils arrived, each recognizing her unique perspective on identifying and cultivating potential. She established the Nwosu Foundation for Gifted Youth, with Tay at its symbolic center, aiming to empower children from underserved neighborhoods across Lagos and beyond. Their programs focused not merely on academics but on observation, critical thinking, and practical application, the same principles Tay had used to dismantle assumptions in the penthouse that unforgettable night for Chinedu Adebayo. The billionaire whose arrogance and prejudice had been publicly dismantled, the consequences were profound. His social standing suffered, his professional credibility faltered, and his personal relationships strained under the weight of public scrutiny. Friends and colleagues who once tolerated or even admired his condescending worldview now viewed him with skepticism, recognizing the dangerous cost of underestimating others. The penthouse, once a symbol of elite dominance, had become a cautionary tale of arrogance confronted by skill and intellect. Even within the professional poker community, Tay's feats became legendary. Experienced players sought his insights not because of his youth, but because of his methodical approach to reading people, controlling narratives, and anticipating behaviors. Vinny Okoro, the veteran who had first witnessed Tay's extraordinary composure, became a mentor and advocate, guiding him toward understanding the deeper psychological aspects of strategy that extended beyond games into life itself. Tay, however, remained grounded. His attention was on learning, observing, and applying knowledge, not on fame or wealth. Each day brought new challenges, new lessons, and new opportunities to grow. In classrooms, libraries, and community centers, he shared his methods with peers, emphasizing that true intelligence is measured not by appearance, background, or privilege, but by curiosity, persistence, and the courage to see clearly what others ignore. At Manhattan Preparatory Academy, where he had been admitted with a full scholarship, Tay's academic achievements continued to astound educators. He excelled in advanced mathematics, behavioral psychology, and strategic reasoning. Teachers marveled not only at his raw intelligence, but at his disciplined application of observation and analysis principles that had once allowed him to outmaneuver the city's most arrogant billionaire. The broader societal impact of Tay's story was perhaps the most remarkable. Across Nigeria and the African continent, educators, parents, and community leaders began to rethink how they identified and nurtured talent. Programs emphasizing critical thinking, strategy, and emotional intelligence gained popularity. The narrative of underestimation and revelation became a case study in classrooms, workshops, and leadership seminars, reinforcing the lesson that brilliance cannot be judged by superficial measures. Even Chinedu, who had retreated from public view, could not escape the lessons of that night. The fall from power, the public embarrassment, and the realization that he had misjudged a child based on age and background left an indelible mark. He became, perhaps reluctantly, a cautionary example of how prejudice, arrogance, and assumptions can lead to personal and professional ruin. Angela often watched Tay as he tutored other children, guiding them through complex strategies and encouraging them to observe, calculate, and act with foresight. You see, she would tell visitors, he is not just teaching poker or mathematics. He is teaching life. Observation, patience, and understanding human behavior. These are the skills that will empower the next generation. Tay's own reflection was simple but profound. Sitting in the library where he had spent countless hours practicing and learning, he mused, the cards don't tell the whole story. People do. If you learn to see them clearly, the game is never about luck. It's about understanding, patience, and preparation. That lesson works at every table and in life itself. Months later, as the Nosu Foundation expanded its reach, Tay was invited to speak at conferences, schools, and educational forums across Africa. His message resonated. Potential is everywhere, brilliance is often invisible, and assumptions can blind even the most confident. Each presentation, each mentorship session, and each scholarship awarded became a ripple in the broader movement to recognize talent where it is least expected but most needed. In the quiet moments, Tay would sometimes think back to the penthouse showdown. The memory was not of triumph alone but of revelation. He had exposed assumptions, dismantled prejudice, and demonstrated that intelligence cannot be measured by inherited privilege. The lessons he taught extended far beyond poker. They were lessons about humanity, fairness, and the courage to challenge the status quo. And somewhere beyond the skyline of Lagos, those who had doubted him, who had dismissed him, had been forced to see differently. For Tay Nwosu, the game had been won long before the chips fell. He had proven that skill, observation, and preparation can transcend circumstance, challenge injustice, and inspire change across generations. The story of that night, an 11-year-old boy calmly outmaneuvering a billionaire, spread not as mere legend but as a beacon. Across continents, classrooms, and communities, it became a testament to the power of intellect, patience, and determination. And for every child overlooked, underestimated, or ignored, the message was clear: brilliance can emerge anywhere. It only requires someone willing to see it. Tay smiled as he closed his notebook, the morning sun spilling into the room. The world had finally begun to notice, but he knew the real work was just starting. The game of life, after all, was much bigger than a single poker table. And with patience, observation, and skill, he was ready to play and to win every hand it dealt. If Tay Nwosu's story taught us anything, it's that brilliance can be hidden in the most unexpected places, and sometimes all it takes is one chance to reveal it to the world. From a quiet apartment in Lagos to outsmarting a billionaire in a high-stakes poker game, Tay showed that curiosity, observation, and courage can shatter assumptions and change lives. Here on African Black Tales, we celebrate the untold genius, the overlooked talent, and the moments when the underestimated rise to greatness. Stories like Tay's remind us that intelligence, determination, and heart can rewrite the rules no matter your age, background, or circumstances. Subscribe now and join us on this journey of hidden brilliance, unexpected victories, and powerful African narratives that inspire, uplift, and challenge the way we see the world. Because somewhere, right now, a brilliant mind is waiting to be discovered, and you won't want to miss it.